Good evening, everybody, and this is Frank Deneen, and welcome to the latest edition of what we're calling Radio Pitch and Putt. And the instigator of this is Willie Parker, who was a great servant to our game. I'm going to tell a brief story about my first introduction to Willie Parker, which was in 1999 when one of my secretary came into the office and said, "There's a chap downstairs and he wants to talk to you," and it was Willie Parker. And I wasn't much of a player at that stage, but he introduced himself and asked me to come up to Collins's because he thought he saw something that in my game, in my pitching actually, and he wanted to give me a coaching session because he thought that I could be a better player. And there was so many people that he touched in his life. I'm joined this evening by Derry O'Donovan from Collins's, who was a lifelong friend of Willie. Hi, Derry.
Hi, Frank. How are you?
I'm joined as well by John Manning, our statistician and favourite within the game. John, you're here as well.
Hi, Frank.
I'm also joined from foreign climes by Derry McCarthy, the great Derry McCarthy from the Kerry Club, who was a great friend and mentor and detail with Willie Parker as well. Derry, you're here too?
Good evening, Frank. Great to know that Kerry's a foreign country now above in Cork, yeah. Thank you.
It is. And an even more foreign country is Patrick Luning is joining us as well from the Netherlands. Good evening, Patrick.
Hello, Frank. How are you doing?
Very good. I'm privileged and proud that you were all able to join us here today, and thank you very much. Derry O'Donovan, Collins's, I'm going to start with you. Your knowledge and memories of Willie Parker go back a fair while. Do you want to tell us how you first met him?
Yeah, Frank, I was actually only a juvenile. I was making out, I think it's around 1967 or 68. Which at the time I was 12 or 13. But I was downtown one day after buying a new putter, and I'm waiting at the bus stop, and I was approached by this gentleman asking me where was I going, up to Collins, who told me he was a member. Little did I know I was talking to Willie. So we went up to Collins. Same day, he waited for me. I dropped some gear in home, went down, had a game. And by the time I was up on the 9th green with Willie, he started coaching me. That was my first introduction to him. And even up to the end, I think when I was in my mid-50s, he was still coaching me all those years later on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's an amazing, and the number of people that I've come across who were coached by him. His profession, I think he actually worked his work around coaching pitch and putt. Would that be something that I could say?
That's right. When I met him first, he worked in the City Hall with the Cork Corporation, and then he got a transfer up to Dublin, and he was working with Telecom as a night telephonist, and he arranged his shifts. He used to do 6 to 12, and Willie, he used to say he was antisocial, so he never had any interest in going to bars or anything like that, so he could work from 6 to 12, go home, have his night's sleep, and play pitch and putt or golf following day. So didn't interfere.
Yeah, and his coaching was unique. You told
coaching was it?
Yeah, was his thing. You told me one story about Stack Allen, the ladies' national junior stroke play.
Yeah, in 1984, my wife qualified for the national. It was up in Stack Allen, up in Navan, and the junior player, they were out at probably 9 or 9:30 in the morning. And before I knew it, into the gate comes Willie, after being on night shift, and tumbled from Dublin out to Stack Allen to watch junior women playing. Like, who do it? He tumbled out, spent the day with us there, then watched the intermediate and watched the senior, whoever was playing after. Got a lift back into Dublin that evening and went back into work again at 6 o'clock.
He was an amazing...
Without being home, went on his digs, yeah.
Amazing character and strongly influenced and involved in Collins's his whole life, and he was amazing. Derry, I'll come back to you a little bit later on if that's okay, because that's
okay.
I'd like to talk to John Manning now. John, you've similar story to everybody else, do you?
I do indeed, Frank. And just briefly before I start, just Jerry referred to the telecommunications industry there and working in the telephone exchange.
Yeah.
In the pre-mobile phone era, the story used to be, Willie, if you want to get in touch with me, he said, dial 10 and ask for Willie Parker. Jerry and myself will understand what a reference that is, but maybe some of your listeners won't.
Yeah.
Anyway, I first met Willie in 1974, not quite as good as Jerry, but quite a while back as well. I was a member of the St. Stephen's juvenile squad in Danmar in Cork, and Willie was coach and mentor to the Collins juveniles at the time, and a series of friendly matches were arranged. So I got the opportunity to play Collins. I think it was the first other course I played apart from St. Stephen's, so that was an experience. And Willie was obviously very involved with the Collins juveniles and very encouraging to them, but equally very encouraging to us. So that was my first interaction with him. Stayed in touch with him then when he moved to Dublin. He first joined Hammond Lane, now defunct, good course on the south side. It's where the David Lloyd Riverview Sports and Tennis Centre is now. That was Hammond Lane. So when that closed down, Willie switched to Shandon, and I'd moved to Dublin around the same time, and I joined Shandon as well. So we met there. So we kind of renewed our acquaintanceship. And he, at that stage, had been the national coach, I think, for the Pitch and Putt Union of Ireland. But a gentleman called Bill Humphreys, a Liverpudlian, who came to Dublin in the mid-40s, I think, and for 6 months, I think, to work. And he stayed for all of his life. Then he became involved with Glenville Pitch and Putt Club and became the office administrator of the Pitch and Putt Union of Ireland. He passed away around 1988, I think. And Willie took over as the office administrator. It was around the time that the union was moving from Joe Leahy's home office in Phibsborough out to the House of Sport on the Long Mile Road, and Willie was heavily involved with that. And it was while he was involved as the office administrator that he got the idea of the Backspin newsletter, or at least a newsletter for the Pitch and Putt Union of Ireland. He came up with the title, Backspin. Yeah. I think what was in his mind was the twin themes of feedback and obviously backspin, a key skill of pitching the ball. He approached me to get involved. So I remember one summer's evening in 1988, I think, the summer of 1988, I was in his flat in Leeson Street. He was living in Leeson Street at the time, and we were pitching the idea of a newsletter to the Pitch and Putt Union of Ireland to Peg and John Smith. John Smith was the president of the union at the time, and Peg was the PRO. And so Backspin was born. And Willie even got the printer, John Costello, who Jerry will know well, another member of Collins, great left-hander who won an All-Ireland Intermediate Stroke player, came second at the All-Ireland Intermediate Stroke player. He got us the printer. Derry, I think his brother was a printer. So Willie, and then through the years, he was a constant source. He was massively interested in sports writing, sports journalism, particularly American sports journalism. So he was a constant source of suggested articles for me. So he was a great support right through the currency of the Backspin magazine. And of course, his coaching tips were legendary. They were very much a sought-after feature that we had in the Backspin magazine through the years.
In the background of while we're talking now, obviously we're doing video as well, but in the background here, I'm going through video of Willie's book. I have his book here. It's called The Short Game: How to Play Pitch and Putt by Willie Parker, and it's published in 1994, according to this. I think it says that anyway. 1994, yeah, and it says in it from Cork to Wagga Wagga as part of the thing as well. Were you involved at all in the book, John?
He used to bounce ideas off me, and a lot of the chapters in the book were previously or subsequently in Backspin. I think Backspin would have been there before that book was published and subsequently. Yeah. So a lot of the material in the book was kind of serialized in Backspin. He had stuff like Get a Grip, Proper Practice, Thinking Straight, Mind Games, because he was a psychology graduate of UCC. So he was equally interested in the mind aspect, the mental aspect of pitch and putt as he was in the actual fundamentals of the technique. I heard you talking to Damien about the technique of putting, and obviously both of you were influenced by him in terms of putting. Yes. But he was equally immersed in the mental aspect of the game. So a lot of the material that was in the book, he kind of serialized, and I could see him in action as well, because obviously he coached many people around Dublin, helped many people around Dublin. So I was involved in the periphery of the book. Can't say that I contributed hugely to it, but I know he bounced ideas off me from time to time, because I was in regular touch with him for years up here in Dublin. He was living in Ashbourne as well for a while before he moved back down to Cork to mastermind the Collins' hosting of the National Stroke, I think it was 1995. It was their 50th anniversary, so he was back down in Cork at that stage. But in between times, he lived up here in the Dublin area, and we would have had a regular interface about writing and all aspects of pitch and putt, really development and coaching and juveniles and everything that was going on in pitch and putt at the time.
He is forward in the book as to Liam and Norma O'Brien, and I know they were great friends and heavily influenced by him as well. He then worked in Mars Sports, and it was at that stage that he moved down towards Kerry. John, I'm going to leave you for the moment, and we're going to talk to the great Derry McCarthy. Derry, do you want to tell us your story?
Basically, my story is true, as you just mentioned there, Maher Sports. I got to know Willie through my good friend Ger O'Connor, who actually worked with Willie inside Maher Sports. So I went in to meet Willie one day. Ger introduced me to him. He took a bit of an interest in me. He knew I played pitch and putt to a reasonably good standard as a juvenile, and he was asking me about my equipment and this, that, and the other. So he had a look at my technique and my stroke and all that inside in the shop. And the one thing he said to me, almost immediately, he said, "Do you mind if I say something to you? I presume you've all heard this yourselves with Willie's coaching." He said, "You're decelerating it small bit," he says, on the stroke. I said, "I've never heard decelerating mentioned before. High up or low down, I just played it, the game as I found it." But Willie mentioned that my stroke, that I had a deceleration in my stroke, and of course he took me to task almost immediately on that, and began to work with me on it. And I think, as John mentioned there, he also had a degree in psychology, which he put to good use as well, because he was a great man to sow seeds in your mind. He might just mention something, leave it ruminate for a while, and come back to you again on it. So much so that he noticed the problem in my stroke, particularly around 96, and he mentioned to me a small little pickup on my takeaway with the putter, which would indicate breaking of the wrist. So eventually, through a lot of cajoling, he got me to change my grip completely. I had played with an interlocking grip, the same as I would have pitched always. Mm-hmm. And he felt that the fact that I was using the same grip for putting as I was for pitching, he felt that maybe that was leading to the issue. And thankfully, through a lot of work with Willie, eventually he got me to the stage where a lot of that was eliminated. I won't say I was the best putter of all times, but I was beyond recognition from where I started until when Willie finished with me, certainly. And I think, as the lads mentioned earlier on, he was an avid writer of letters, whether he was in England, whether he was in Holland. He always kept in touch with people like myself, and obviously he's been in touch with everybody else here via letters and phone calls and everything else. And, he was a man that was very close to us all.
Yeah, I've a selection of some of his letters that Patrick Luning was nice enough to get us involved, or to send us on as well. And I'm going to talk about one specific letter a little later on that epitomises Willie. Was he involved in the Deer Park Club as well, and was he coaching down there too when he was with you, Derry?
Very much so, Frank. Whether it was a player or whether it was a complete novice, Willie took everybody under his wing. Ladies, juniors, seniors, adults. It didn't really matter to Willie. He was there to help everybody. He was a real people person, I felt. He took a keen interest in people, and he loved to see people doing well. And if he could help anybody in any way to improve their game and make them enjoy the game a little bit more, that would certainly reflect well on Willie. And he wouldn't be outwardly boasting that he helped X, Y, or Z. But I know from my interactions with Willie over the years, and I kind of mentioned it there the other evening, countless national champions have gone through Willie at one point and have had help from Willie over the years, quietly cajoling and kind of getting his ideas across, and certainly made better players out of an awful lot of people over the years.
Absolutely. How did he then, I don't know who knows the answer to this, John Manning, you might be able to, but he then went to England for a period of time in Chelmsford, I think it was, and subsequently then moved on to further afield. Do you know the story there?
Yeah, he went to Britain in 1996 to work with a guy called David Bugg, who ran a number of courses around the London area, including Chelmsford, as you say, Frank, and also one called Centenary Park in Harrow that Willie was particularly involved with. I think he actually worked at that course for a while. It was a company called Golfwise. And then he moved on to the Netherlands, I think, around Millennium Year. It was after the 1999 European Championships, which he masterminded, of course, with David Bogue in Chelmsford, and of course Derry and Patrick were starring in that. I think it was after that he went to the Netherlands.
Excellent. So, Patrick Luning, tell us your story, or your version of the great Willie Parker.
Well, it won't be a longer story as the other guys have, but well, in '98, Pitch and Putt started in Holland. There was no course at all. So we started in '98 knowing nothing about Pitch and Putt or what it was. So we had a couple of golfers that were telling us how to play Pitch and Putt. And the owner at that moment, I think he spoke Willie in England, and he said, "Listen, can't you come over to Holland and show us how proper Pitch and Putt is played?" And Willie said, "Okay." And at that time, I was working on that course, doing maintenance, doing the bar, etc. And so I met Willie over there, and he stayed, I think, the first time for a couple of weeks, telling a lot of things, talking about the game, telling us that we had to use tees and things like that because we know nothing at all. And he went back to England, and at that point he wasn't too happy over there, so he would like to come back to Holland. And my mum and dad had a spare room, and they said, "Okay, come over, you could stay at our place." So he stayed for a year then. And I think I spent every day that I worked on the Pitch and Putt course in Kukanga, I spent with Willie talking about the pitching, coaching, maintenance about the course, everything. So I've seen him for a year. He was almost my granddad. That was the feeling I had with him. He was a great guy, and really missed.
Yeah, absolutely. And you, of course, named the bar in the course after him, Willie's Pub.
That was later on, because the course in Kukanga was there for about 3 years, and then I started my own course as an owner.
Yes.
And there was only one thing I could do, and that was naming the pub after Willie, because he brought me so much, for not just me, but Holland completely brought them so much in Pitch and Putt. So we decided to call it Willie's Pub, and he was really proud of that. It wasn't the guy that was looking for people to tell him how good he was, but in the small things he really enjoyed it. So yeah, that was the only thing we could do. And then, well, Willie was a guy that introduced you to everybody, to be honest, because when we started playing Pitch and Putt, he said, "You have to come over to Ireland." And we did. And at that point, he showed us around in Cork, in Killarney. He showed me Dublin. He get me involved with great players like Derry, John, Ray Murphy, and yeah, that was great and a big experience for me.
Excellent. Thank you, Patrick, for your memories of a great man. Jerry Donovan, I'm going to come back to you again. Obviously, around the year 2000, he got quite ill and was back in Cork and based back in Cork. I have another slight story in that I was in St. Anne's one day, and a car arrived into the car park, and out of it came Willie Parker, who was in the oncology ward in CUH at the time, suffering obviously with his cancer. And out of the car came Willie and 3 nurses from the oncology ward, and he was coaching them and introducing them to the game. You were telling me a story about a guy that he picked up as a hitchhiker as well.
That's right. He was coming down from Dublin. Willie used to hitchhike everywhere, and he had pen pals all over the world from it. He was telling me this particular day, I think he was coming down from Dublin, could have been Tipperary after Pitch and Putt, but picked up a guy, a European, and explained to him about Pitch and Putt, and this guy had no interest in it. It was an easy game, and Willie wouldn't have it, but Willie brought him straight up to St. Anne's, a hitchhiker up to St. Anne's, and spent an hour with him, proving him wrong. And the two of them played away for an hour, and after, Willie was forever a pen pal with this guy after. I think he was Polish, if I remember, but I believe he had pals all over the world that he met like that. He used to say, in his younger days, he used to hitchhike everywhere himself. So when he had a car, then if ever he saw somebody, he'd always pick them up. And, he was very friendly.
Of course, he was one in a million. Guys, I'm going to read an extract from a letter here. This letter was written in the 18th of July 1997, and it was written to John Walsh in the Conses course. It was 2 weeks after he won his stroke play in Stackallan. I'm just going to read it, just a couple of paragraphs. Dear John, just a line to congratulate you on your win in the stroke play. Great score, great consistency. I'd say you surprised no one and pleased everybody. A very popular winner. You deserve it too for all the work you've put into Conses. You know yourself what the good players will bother about anything in their own games. So my experience, people like yourself and Derry McCarthy are more worthy of praise than many others who simply play and go for glory. Thank God there are a few others like you around, but well done again, and I'm really delighted. It's a magnificent course in Sea Point. I'd love to tackle again. Now I know how to play. It's always terrified me when I played first. The couple of times I was there from Dublin, those small upturned lightning fast greens, but a model layout, you could bring Sevy or Norman or Greg Norman there to show it off at any time. So you've got that. The last bit that he says is that, I want to thank John for allowing me to talk about this letter. All those years pitching gimmies and Conses weren't wasted, but the work you put in there and the kind of guy you are. It epitomises the type of letter that Willie wrote consistently and constantly to people throughout the world, and I believe he's one of the main factors in the game that we have and where it has come from. Jerry, your last thing is about his final wishes and his ashes and where they may be.
Yeah, it was his sister told me that Willie always maintained that the nicest course he ever saw, it was a pay as you play. It wasn't affiliated, I don't think, ever with Union, but it was called Bertie's Farm up in Sligo. And Willie said, as you go into the entrance to that clubhouse, that pitch and putt course, it was the nicest view we ever came across, with the mountains, the sea, the scenery in the background. It was the nicest place he had ever seen. And when Willie died, that's where he wanted his ashes scattered, at the entrance to Bertie's Farm up in Sligo. And Willie's sister, Assumpta, and John Parker went up and did that, honoured his last wish. I think that's where Willie's ashes are scattered, yeah.
Thank you. I think we can all say that we've tried our best to honour Willie in this little snippet of a show. Gents, thank you all very much. I'm humbled.
Thank you, Frank.
Thanks, Frank. Thanks, lads.
Thanks, guys.